And we'd like to get started with a moment of silence, so please join me for that. And please rise for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have Councillor King is on the phone tonight, and Councillor Fazer is absent. And we're going to get started with a public hearing. So at this time, I will open the public hearing to consider an application to vacate the common property line between tax lots 4200, 4300, and 4400 of map number 360518DD. We will begin the hearing with a staff report, followed by a presentation by the applicant, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by persons in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by the applicant and staff. After that has occurred, the public comment portion will be closed, and the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? Are there any councilors who wish to disclose discussions, contacts, or other ex parte information they have received prior to this meeting regarding the application? In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria which are set forth in the Development Code. All testimony which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. If you would like a copy of the report, please write that on a note to the city manager and one will be provided. It is important to remember if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. And the hearing will now proceed with a report from staff.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you stated, Mayor, this is a property line vacation between 3 different parcels. There are actually 4 owned by the same property owner, but 3 of them are impacted by the application tonight. And it's located here at the southwest corner of Southeast L Street and Southeast 8th Street. So we're just 1 block off of 7th Street to the east. And what's highlighted on the screen here are the 4 lots that are owned by the Pregnancy Center. The 3 smaller lots that are in the northeast corner are the ones that are impacted by the application. So they're looking to consolidate those so that they can proceed with a new 2-story, about 8,000 square foot building there. The relationship to your council goals is to facilitate sustainable and manageable growth. Here's a look at the assessor's map that just kind of shows you the actual tax lot numbers there. Again, there's basically a north-south lot line and a couple of east-west lot lines that are being proposed to be removed. Here's a picture of the site plan that we're processing through a separate development process through planning. Just to kind of give you a better sense, again, L Street is on the top of the screen, 8th Street on the right. There is an existing building on the south side that is there today. What's outlined in red is the approximate area where the 3 lots that are existing, the 3 tax lots today. You can see there's a new proposed building that would be in the upper right corner of the screen there, northeast corner, with some associated parking. So expanding the parking and then keeping the existing buildings. Here's what it looks like on the ground, street view off of 8th Street. the existing building on the left and the vacant property here. Again, there's 3 building lots that are actually historically platted there. So as you've seen many times, we have 2 required criterion in order to authorize the removal of lot lines. Those are listed there on the screen for you. We did do a mailing to everyone within 100 feet of the property, and we did not receive any comments back. So here's your call to action. There's really no cost implication on these applications. Call to action date, deadline December 27th. Recommended to be tonight, and then you have the motion options there.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any questions? Not seeing any. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak in opposition of the application? All right, we will close the public hearing and turn this back over to you, Council. Rick.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance vacating the common property lines between tax lots 4200, 4300, 4400 of map number 36-518 DD and have it read by title only, first reading.
Is there a second? Second from Rob, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? All right, Rick, you made the motion to approve the ordinance, and how do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Karen?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 4200, 4300, and 4400 of map number 36-0518 DD.
Thank you. Valerie?
I move to adopt the ordinance vacating the common property lines between tax lot 4200, 4300, and 4400 of map number 36-0518 DD and have it read by title only, second reading.
Second from Rick. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Val, you made the motion this time. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Karen?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 4200, 4300, and 4400 of map number 36-0518 DD.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is council action item A regarding investment strategies, and our finance director, J.C. Rowley, is presenting.
Good evening, Council. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward, but you have an opportunity here to make some, or give some guidance or directions and make some decisions. The subject and summary tonight is guidance for items outside of the investment policy. So do we want to make local considerations for certificates of deposits and the connection to community support and partnerships, and also corporate considerations to remove certain entities as investment opportunities that don't align with council values and goals. The relationship to council goals would be to provide cooperative, shared leadership involving council, staff, and community. So in the investment policy under CDs, we have a 10% maximum holdings in the portfolio and a 5% maximum holdings per issuer. And currently, our local CD holdings are these listed in that table. And you can see the maturity dates, and I do want to focus on the percentage yields on these. As you can see, they are probably well below market standards. And they don't appear to be going up as far as with the other Fed movements that happened today. Maybe you can read that, but the 90-day Treasury as of 8/8, when I did a walk around, was 2.65 as a comparison, and I'll have some other backup materials in pages 9 through 12 in the packet that show things that we shopped around, which is this next slide. So on that same 8/8 day, I walked around to some banks here locally in Grants Pass. and I got 5 responses. The high in People's Bank of that 1%, that is actually probably somewhat of a sale, because you could tell the longer-termed CDs that they were offering actually went down in interest rate. So they were trying to pique people's interest with that 1%. So that's kind of outside of the curve in general. And again, that same 2.65% as of 8/8. Today, the 90-day Treasury rate was about 3.21. So you can really see that change in interest as far as an investment opportunity. So just as a rhetorical question, do you want local connection to community partnerships through CD investments and what we hold in local banks as part of our diversification in the local area? And then moving on to corporate bonds and commercial paper in our investment policy, we have a 35% maximum in the total portfolio and 5% holdings per issuer. This is relatively new with the new passage of the investment policy edits as of July, and the city currently does not have any within the portfolio. On the consent agenda item, there's the potential for us to enter into a contract with an investment advisor, and they will be recommending probably to make some purchases in this area. So some entities and cities have disallowed certain corporate bond opportunities, even though allowed by policy or ORS, because the values of these companies don't align with their governing body's values and goals. And so on page 12 of your packet, there's an actual list of the corporate bonds and commercial paper that are subject, that have been recommended by our potential investment advisors, worthy of long-term buy and holding strategies. There's 8 U.S. banks, 4 financial institutions, 7 consumer, 4 technology, 6 Canadian banks, and 2 fossil fuels. In our call to action, there's kind of like 3 alternatives here. We can maximize returns, which would discontinue most CD investments unless an opportunity presents itself. We could keep a small amount in CDs in local banks. If we go down that path, I would probably think that we would need to keep a relatively minimum amount. I gave a recommended 5% maximum if we were to go down that path. Or you could choose to be closer to the maximum of the city policy for CDs and still remain in that policy alignment and have 5% per issuer. And then another decision or call to action regarding corporate bonds and commercial paper is keep the list that is allowed by the investment policy ORS, or you can make the decision to remove certain corporations that don't align with potentially your core values and goals. The call to action date is at your discretion. With no action, I will do the best to get the most return based on how the policy reads. And we can always reevaluate this in the future if something does change. There are example motions on page 11 because I didn't really know where this conversation may lead to. So there's a couple of examples in there. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, JC. It looks like Rick has a question.
Thank you, JC. On the current CDs we have, is there a penalty for discontinuing those and others? Is there a future maturity date with a penalty if we back out now? And do you recommend going to maturity, or because the penalty may be so small that we have that opportunity to change?
I could definitely work that out with our potential investment advisors, but most of these are based on this maturity date. They're going to mature here in the next few days anyways, so it just makes sense to just keep them in there until they mature and then pull them out then.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thank you. So on the call to action slide, it talks about some of the options, and it says maximize returns, which would discontinue most CD investments. So if we discontinued the CD investments, we would be reinvesting that money where?
Other avenues, so that could be U.S. Treasuries, U.S. agencies, corporate bonds. U.S. Treasury right now is very much more appealing just as a basis above CD rates right now. So corporate bonds are going to be a little bit above that normally.
So if we decided to discontinue most CD investments, we would be having another meeting deciding where those monies would be invested, or?
No, typically you would entrust me with making a good decision with working with our investment advisor as far as what they recommend, and they go by policy and they evaluate what would be the best laddering of our portfolio and which investments that we should be entering into.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie?
Knowing that, of course, when we're investing and moving and we're dealing with our constituents' money, can you explain the ORSs that have kind of been built into that for, because I know that there are laws that make it that if it's a municipality or some sort of government, they can't just willy-nilly go off here and there. Can you just give me a little assurance there?
Yeah, so when we went through the major edits in this last July of the investment policy, that was to align our policy exactly to ORS.
So previously, we had been more conservative, shall we say, than what the ORS allowed. So sadly, we should have been doing this for the last 5 years when everything was booming. But hey, what can we say? Thank you.
Other questions? Brian?
So it looks like the majority right now is currently with Umpqua Bank. Do we have any idea of, because it looks like it's about 8.5 million, do we have any idea of how those funds are, reinvested in the community?
I can't give you any assurance that there's a direct correlation between the money that we would be putting in local banks and the potential gain that the city would be getting out of it.
Do you think there's any opportunity for the city if we were to partner with a local bank, whether it be Evergreen or Rogue Federal or whoever it is, to have some sort of negotiation with them because of the size of that amount of money that they may be willing to agree to invest it locally?
I could definitely try and have that conversation with them. Based on their rates, it's almost like they want to deter us from going down that investment opportunity.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
Mayor, I had a question. This is Joel.
Go ahead, Joel.
So the CDs are rather low locally. I would take it that there's higher CDs available, higher rate of returns available in other places across the country.
So I do have our potential new investment advisor sitting here in the audience, and he's kind of whispering in my ear that potentially not in the banking side.
Not on the banking side?
That is correct.
Okay. How about like bonds and that kind of thing, municipal bonds, other cities?
Correct, and that is one of the new areas that we have opened up in our investment policy that align with ORS, that we would be able to purchase municipal bonds in California, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon.
Okay, so they seem to give a return, what, about 3 to 5%?
Generically speaking, yeah.
Okay, so then the other thing is, do you anticipate the interest rates going up here over the next 3 or 4 years?
If I knew that, I probably wouldn't have this job.
Yeah, I understand. So anyway, one of the things I was contemplating was I would anticipate, at least it's predicted over the next 2 or 3 years, for interest rates to go up. And so to lock into a long-term CD at this point in time at a lower interest rate probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So at a minimum, we need, if we're going to have some CDs, we need to have short-term CDs now, and then as the interest rate goes up and we get a higher rate of return, then we can lock them in for the long term. Am I communicating?
No, I think I'm following your question. I would advise you that the rate on a 90-day treasury is astronomically larger at this point. And so the rate on a CD is going to be lower than the rate that I showed you potentially on that list because it's at a shorter term.
Right. So you're talking about federal. What did you say was higher? I'm sorry.
Just the generic U.S. Treasury rate.
Oh, U.S. Treasury rate. Okay, and then you have short-term Treasury rates. You have long-term Treasury rates. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so at this point in time, given where we're at, we probably would want to go with shorter term, even though it's at a lower interest rate, so that when we do lock it into a higher interest, into a longer term, we get a higher interest rate over the long term.
We do have, or I have had precursory meetings with our investment advisor, and we're planning on laddering our portfolio to be both long-term and short-term, in the sense that we can manage highs of interest rates and continue to invest outwards, or if the downturn in the economy actually does happen, we can go at a shorter portfolio rate.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, I just don't want to have the same strategy for all of them and have a stepwise progression such that when we do have rising interest rates, that we're not tied into a long-term low interest rate like we could do. Okay, I understand what you're thinking. Thank you.
Mayor, I'm going to jump in. Okay, I just have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Are there any advantages in particular to keep money in local banks? I mean, that's the question I have, because that's one of our choices, and it's just like, you know, you always think, yay, local. But are there advantages to it? I mean, do they, as Brian said, do they invest more in or negotiate more with you if you are more invested in them, or have you found that not to be true?
So in my history, I've worked with entities that were on two opposite sides of the spectrum. One that decided that they could always do other partnerships through other things, and then another entity which didn't have any CDs at all. There's not a lot of opportunities through the CD interest rate right now, and I would gather that it is a deposit in their banking system, which means that they can loan that money out based on their loaning rules, that it would garner some, but I don't know if $1 million would increase their business model that much. I can't speculate on that.
Other questions? All right, this is a council action item, so we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anyone who wanted to speak on this issue? Looks like not. So we'll close the public comment and turn it over to council for discussion. Vanessa?
There's kind of been some tiptoeing around my interest on this topic, which is investing in local banks. We often hear, you know, the importance of investing locally during the holidays, but I think that that's a principle that we should hold all year, and I think that it's very important we continue to empower our local banks, and we consider the amount of not only our investment but the life cycle of the dollar itself. So although we aren't receiving the same yield that we would under a corporate bond structure, these local banks do invest a significant amount in the communities that they service. I can see just from a quick Google that Evergreen Bank has donated a significant amount of money, over $100,000, to Southern Oregon fire victims. Umpqua Bank has a very same charitable aspect, is where they were helping fire victims. People's Bank has a Southern Oregon housing initiative where they're helping low-income homeowners purchase homes. So I think for us to keep our funds in these local banks continues to empower them to make these initiatives in our community, and it really circulates the dollar in a more ideal way that we want it to be circulated, because when we invest in corporate bonds, we're sending that money away, and that money is disappearing from the community forever, whereas when we invest it locally, it stays locally.
Rick?
I realize there's different financial instruments out there which can create different rates of return. I think it's important, especially when we're dealing with this kind of money, for the city to at least explore some increase in return. So while I would be in favor of retaining a small amount locally, I would like to see the opportunity for a different investment policy. Thank you.
Val?
Yeah, I would vote in favor of keeping a small amount in local banks, a minimum amount, just because I do think it's important that we have some money locally, but at the same time, when you can make money, we all know that you make money when you have money and you can invest money. I used to, as a school teacher, tell people to teach children to put their money in the bank. And I realize now that was not necessarily a mistake because they're not going to get anywhere if they just put their money and have it sitting in a bank. So things have changed, and I would like to see this city get more interest. So I would vote to keep a small amount of CDs in local banks and otherwise have somebody else manage our funds and do what they can to get the most for their money.
Other discussion? Brian?
I appreciate Councilor Auger's sentiment. I don't know that I necessarily agree in this case. If we can go from CDs to the Treasury rate, that's a couple percent point bump right there. And when you're talking about $9.6 million, that's $250,000 a year, more return than the city would be getting, which is significant. And the city, we could either make ourselves a more resilient organization with that money, or we could invest that money into the community as we see fit, just as a local bank could. So I'm personally okay with moving away from CDs. I don't know that keeping a small amount in a local bank really does much good for anybody. It's almost like a nod or a token offering. So I could take or leave that, I guess. But I think I would say regarding, we've had a discussion about the corporate bond and commercial paper list, which is on page 12. And given some of the discussions that have been had on this dais and with the Sustainability Committee, I think that it would be worth considering. There's 31 organizations on that list. I think it'd be worth considering maybe not investing in the two that are related to fossil fuels, Chevron and ExxonMobil. That still leaves 29 other ones for us to invest in, which is a plenty big palette to choose from.
Rob?
Yeah, I tend to look at Vanessa's perspective on this. I think is in many ways accurate, but I think that we can do it in a more efficient way by actually moving away from the local banks because essentially, as Brian just brought up, I mean, we, the city, can be the ones who invest locally, and we'll be able to do more of that with bigger returns on our holdings. So, and we do it all, we do it many times a year, whether it's, actually recently it was it 700,000 or was it $1 million? I can't remember, where that we gave local businesses out of our money, out of our coffers, we gave them COVID relief. Now, obviously, COVID relief came from everywhere else, but we also did it locally. And of course, we've got, there's all kinds of projects and programs for blighted buildings and facade improvements, et cetera, and much of that is coming from our own coffers. So the more we can increase our returns, the more we can invest back, and I think we'll do it more efficiently. Believe it or not, in this case, we'll probably be more efficient than going through keeping CDs in the local bank. I think we'll be able to end up giving more back to our own community by kind of cutting our local banks out of it, unfortunately.
Further discussion?
Sarah, I had some thoughts, if it's timely.
Yep, go ahead, Joel.
Well, one of the things I thought was, as we make changes, that we do it on a more gradual scale than all at once, because it gives the local businesses a chance to adapt, because they are important to our community. The other thing I'm thinking is, me personally, when I look at the list of, from what I understand, were stocks and what was approved versus federal treasury notes, that we would tend to be on the more conservative side because it is public money. And there's risk associated with each investment. There's probably less risk associated with the feds or with city bonding needs or school bonding needs. across the state of Oregon and, or even the United States. And so I would favor that and at least double or triple the interest rate that we're getting now, but still have not take on any additional risk.
Brian?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and make a motion to, regarding this topic, to move to maximize the returns, which would potentially discontinue most CD investments unless an opportunity presents itself. In addition, I would move to remove Chevron and Exxon as allowable investment opportunities under policy.
Is there a second? Rick, thank you. Discussion on that?
Well, again, I guess I have a question for the presenter. This is Joel. This is kindly Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what is, we discussed interest rates. We haven't discussed risk. What are the differences in risk between the different options you've given us?
I mean, obviously there's risk, but I would say in a general sense versus what you may do on your personal finances side, there would be less risk in these kinds of opportunities, and ORS limits what we can do because they don't want a city to take large substantial risks.
So give me a feeling for investing in these corporations. They actually can go down then over time, or they can go up, and they fluctuate back and forth, right? But over the long term, they'll go up.
Yes and no, depending on how you're trading these, but these are more like bond issuances from these corporations. So there's going to be a set interest rate when we buy these.
Okay, so then the liquid, okay, you're cutting out a little bit on me. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but the other thing then, as we do that, the liquidity of the different investments, if the city needed some money for whatever reason, how does that play into the decision?
So our current strategy is potentially to hold between 25 and 30 million at all times. That would be available within one day.
Okay, great. Okay. So in terms of what Brian said, again, I would phase it in at least over a 2-year period and not have it all go at once. And I would keep them, like Vanessa said, I would still keep a percentage in local banks. Have to be.
Hang on, Joel, you're cutting out.
Just because of what Vanessa said, to the child. Okay, just a second. Okay, Charlie, can you get out? No.
Joel, that got pretty...
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that got pretty garbled. What I heard you say is that you supported phasing the change in over time and also keeping a small amount in local banks, and then it got pretty murky.
Well, the murky part probably is irrelevant.
Okay, if that captured the gist of...
Of.
Okay, thank you. I think Vanessa and then Rob.
On the motion, I just wanted to clarify, although I do agree with the sentiment of it, I don't think that a majority of this corporation should get off the hook for being supporters of fossil fuel expansion and production. So I think that just needs to be stated. It's not just Chevron and Exxon.
Valerie wants a clarification.
Clarification.
I believe the motion included to withhold the 2 fossil fuel corporations, Exxon and Chevron, which are on face value 2 of the most obvious related. For example, Berkshire Hathaway, they make their riches in burning coal for power. A lot of the banks on that list invest in fossil fuel expansion and production, so I just don't think that those 2 should be the only 2 included. A lot of them are inextricably linked to fossil fuel expansion and production.
Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, I would actually take that kind of in the other direction and say when I look at this list, and I'm not well versed on all of them, when I look at this list, there are so few of the companies on this list that I would call to be, we'll say that we could be sure would be environmentally clean
or would be humanely, we'll say, clean, treat people well around the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, just taking the 2 fossil fuel companies off the list is essentially virtue signaling. I mean, it's just, to me, it's almost, it's laughable, actually, when I look at the list and I think about, if you really want to look at it, I'm sure that someone could, and people have written many doctoral theses on every one of these companies and how harmful they can be around the world. As a result of that, quite frankly, I'm not going to cherry pick, and I'm not going to try to come up with the pristine diamonds on this list, because there probably aren't any. And so to just take 2 of them off, or to take 4 of them off, to me is really just theater. And so I would actually not really want to take any of them off, unless we. It's just, I mean, it's quite laughable when you actually think about some of the, we'll say, atrocities around the world that many of these companies have funded and are documented to have funded. So that's just the nature of investing. Now, we could go completely green and pristine, et cetera, or try to, but I don't think that that is necessarily a project that this council or this community necessarily wants us to take on. So I'm really not, I'm not going to just for appearances take 2 companies off that list or 4 companies off that list, because a lot of them here are really, they're not clean in any way. They're doing a lot of harm in a lot of ways. But if we wanted to have a broader discussion on that, I would be up for that. But to just take a few off this list is just for show, as far as I'm concerned.
Rick?
In a continuation with Rob is saying, JC, when we look at, I'm familiar with corporate bonds and commercial paper to some degree, but when you relate the difference to CDs, you can get a CD for 3 months or 6 months or 1 year and so forth. Is that also true of a corporate bond and commercial paper, or usually those 1 year and longer?
Typically, they issue them for longer than 1 year, but we can come in and purchase them after they've already been initially issued. And so we can literally ladder them in a spot that would act like a 90-day or a 6-month or 9 months, depending on how that fits into our portfolio.
Okay, thank you. That helps me, because I realize then if we're investing in that, then we would have the opportunity for the higher interest rate, even for a short period. Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I guess that brings me to the question, because you were talking about liquidity and the fact that you want to, that there is a policy that says we should be able to, if we need to get so much money, we have to be able to get it. How is that money invested at all, or is it just sitting in a bank somewhere, just out of curiosity?
So we keep that 25-ish million in the LGIP, which earns right now about 1.9%. So it sits kind of as a savings, but we still earn interest on that.
Okay. I still, like I said, in looking at, I tend to agree that I don't want to choose favorites. I just kind of figure that, that's the job of the professional who's doing it. And I agree. We don't have the knowledge of knowing what those corporations exactly are doing. Probably every single one of them we could find something bad about if we went to the Star or one of those magazines. They'd show something. But I still have a sense that we need to keep minimal in the banks locally, because that to me shows a local support. So I still would like to see that.
Other comments? Brian?
Yeah, it may not make much difference for little city of Grants Pass to not invest in those companies. But in the bigger picture, when you look at municipalities and other organizations around the world, if they all do it, it does make a difference. And I'm not sure how well all of the counselors up here are versed on climate change and what causes it, but it's caused by the fossil fuels that come out of the ground and are combusted and put into the air. And that's what these 2 companies do. So I don't know if y'all understand that that's something that we as a society need to get a handle on. So it's a drop in the bucket, and you know, it doesn't do us any harm to not invest in that.
Further discussion? No? Okay. Time to vote. So the motion was to maximize returns, which would potentially discontinue most CD investments unless an opportunity presents itself. And that implies leaning towards corporate bonds, but eliminating Chevron and Exxon from the list on page 12. Brian, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Val?
No.
Rob?
No.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
No.
Joel?
Hang on here. No.
Okay, the motion failed 4-3. Further discussion? Valerie?
I would like to make a motion, here, just let me find my piece of paper here, to keep a small amount of CDs in local banks, minimum, and otherwise move things, maximize returns from those CD investments into corporate bonds and commercial, and have it be let our investor make the choice and not choose any specific ones.
Is there a second? Rick?
Clarification?
Yes.
Clarification?
Yep.
You say small amount, so can you define that?
Well, in here, it is written as a call to action is keep a small amount of CDs in local banks, recommended $5 million maximum per current market conditions. So I'm going to assume that that would be the recommendation that came from JC, am I correct? So that's what I was going on. Mm-hmm.
Further discussion on that? Brian?
Keeping any amount of money in low-yield CDs in our local banks, it doesn't really do anything for the bank in the scheme of things. They have so much, and it doesn't really do anything for the city. So that seems like virtue signaling to me. So I'm going to vote no.
I didn't catch, Valerie. What did you declare a small amount? Like what the percentage would be?
I was going along with what was recommended on this, keep a small amount of CDs in local banks. And then here it says recommended $5 billion maximum. So I'm assuming that
$5 million?
Yeah, over to, is that what you're saying, JC? I'm just basically trying to get from JC what he was recommending.
It's just a generic, like, I don't think we should go above 5 million, if that was a maximum.
Max, yeah.
So like, again, to clarify maybe what you're asking, if I only put 3 million in, is that okay per?
Yes.
Because that
yes.
meets the.
Yeah, because I don't want to put a dollar amount on it, but I want to have a minimum.
So what would the minimum be, if I can ask a clarifying
Well,
question?
I'm looking at Umpqua, which has a lot in there. So I'm just saying $1 million Umpqua. It's looking like right now we just have Umpqua and Washington Federal. Am I correct? Okay. I would be interested in. I personally think Evergreen is something that has done a lot for the community, and the same with Road Credit Union. So I don't know if those two can be added and just say a maximum of $3 million to those banks. Is that possible? I don't know.
In total, correct? So you
Yes,
want like
in
maybe
total,
like
yes.
a $500,000 or $1 million in each of those
Yes,
banks that you just
exactly.
mentioned?
Yes.
I apologize. Did you just say 3 or 5 million?
3 million.
Okay,
And
thank
3
you.
million. No, I'm glad we're clarifying it because it did need to be clarified. I just wasn't sure exactly how to do it.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
Hey,
Go ahead, Joel.
yeah. If I barge in inappropriately, you just tell me to wait.
No.
The other thing that we lost here during the discussion, I think it was Brian that brought it up, of giving the local banks a chance to negotiate to perhaps get a equal interest rate to what we get in the corporate bonds. I know when they're like the interest rates for home construction and those kind of things, they're up around 7-8%, and so that gives a little bit of a profit margin there that they can play with.
Would you like to? So, I mean, I did walk into Evergreen. And I was presented what
I
was.
just bring the idea so that we didn't lose it.
Sorry, Joel, that was JC trying to answer your question.
Yeah, so I did walk into Evergreen. I didn't try and negotiate as I was given a flyer as what they can offer at that point in time. Even if I believe I might have the opportunity to negotiate, I don't know if they're going to even come close to the current market conditions and interest rates that other avenues can offer us.
You know, that wouldn't surprise me either, so if in your best judgment you think that that's a waste of time, I'm okay with that. But I would trust your judgment on that.
Okay, further discussion? Rob?
I guess in theory, I really like the idea of trying to give local banks a chance to essentially earn our business in that regard and be competitive. I understand that it could be basically a fool's errand to try to do that. I'm not sure how much effort is involved to make that call or make that presentation, but I could definitely see. To me, would be the appropriate thing to attempt. Would be the appropriate thing to attempt, be to negotiate with. But you know, it may not bear any fruit. But to me, that sounds very reasonable. And if they can't compete and truly, basically don't want to compete, is what it would mean. They don't really don't want our business that badly. If they don't want it, that's fine. Then I have no trouble moving it somewhere else where we can then get a greater return, and then we as a city have more to essentially distribute and make our city productive and have more to loan and give in different grants and so forth. So I'd say that if the banks are not interested, I think that we should be interested in helping our city to the maximum degree, and that would be not investing locally if they don't really want to do, you know, if our business is not that important to them.
Further discussion? All right, so what I have for the motion was to keep an amount of $3 million invested with CDs and local banks, and then to use the other portion to maximize with corporate bonds and allowing the financial advisor the flexibility of choosing from these corporations to maximize returns. Does that?
Yep,
Okay.
that sounds good.
Brian, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wanting to clarify, is it 3 million or is it up to 3 million?
Up to 3 million, I don't know, 3 million max. I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know that I could, I mean, it's kind of his business, not mine.
Mayor, this is Joel, when you're ready.
Go ahead, Joel.
Well, I was wondering if we wanted to consider just amending the motion slightly by saying we at first would at least approach the local banks in an attempt to negotiate. I wouldn't put a whole lot of time and effort into it, but at least make that presentation in 30 minutes or whatever, and then because that would be good communication and send a good signal just by itself, even if we don't follow through with it, or if they can't be competitive.
Are you interested, Val?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would go with that, yes.
Okay, so you would amend it to
I would amend it.
include a request to negotiate with local banks? And Rick, you had the second. Do you agree to that?
Is that on the 3 million or on the 9 million?
On the 3.
3 million.
I'd be fine with the 3 million. Thank you.
Rob, you had something?
No, I just had a comment. I think that's. I really appreciate Joel's perspective on that. I think it's the right way to go.
Brian?
Guys, to think that the finance director is going to be able to walk in one of these banks with $1.5 million and they're going to turn the rate structure upside down for us is absolutely ridiculous. And it's hilarious that we're talking about it.
Further discussion on the motion? All right. All right, I was just going to reiterate. Do you want to?
Well, I need clarity on the motion. So if we approach the banks and they're not willing to match our return in other investment strategies, then do we not invest 3 million and we just go with a maximize our investment? Was that the spirit of the motion?
Well, I'm asking, I guess my question to that would be, what is the maximum that they have to, what is the rate that we would get somewhere in a corporate? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so let me just give a
Yeah.
dollar value so it makes
That's-
maybe a little bit more clarity. So if you go back to slide 4 and you look at Evergreen, at 0.1% on an annualized return, that's $1,000. If you look at a 3% return, that's $30,000. There's a
Huge.
potential
Yeah.
large discrepancy there in
Yeah.
the market.
Gosh, that's what you get for making a motion when you don't. The truth of the matter is, my original intent was I would just like to keep some local. And so I guess there's no way that they're going to be able to match that. I mean, that's like ridiculous when you look at it from that perspective. So my original intent, and I will say that, is to keep $3 million in our local banks and in the CD, whatever their rate is, and then to go with the corporate bonds otherwise. So I guess that's what I think Rick was backing me up on. So we'll vote on that and see where it goes. But you're right. I think it's kind of a joke to expect them to climb up a pole to be able to do that for the city. I think it's kind of like they'll say, this is math. It doesn't work in our book. So anyway, I'll stick with my original.
Before we vote on this, I have an idea regarding your negotiations. So on slide 4, where we can see that local banks have a range of return, how about the negotiation focus on getting
Who can the most?
best return from local banks with the $3 million,
Yeah.
whether that includes
One, two.
splitting it between a couple or going with one?
Yeah.
Does that
makes sense.
satisfy your goal?
That is more the intent, I think.
Okay, so you don't need to split it among the 5 or so that we had
Right.
before, feel any obligation to do that? Okay. So what I have here is that we would be investing up to $3 million with local banks, that we're requesting a negotiation to seek the best return out of, that we can with that $3 million from the local banks, and investing the remainder with corporate bonds and allowing the financial advisor the flexibility of maximizing returns and not eliminating any particular corporations off the list.
Yes, that is my motion. Thank you. Thank you for helping us work through that.
Okay, Valerie, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
And Rob?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Vanessa?
No.
Brian?
No.
Joel?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2. Further discussion on this? I think as far as the process goes, you'll come back to us again with a plan, or?
Yeah, we're supposed to give investment reports, and so it'll be clear what we're buying and what interest rate at which those will be at in the future.
Okay, but you have what you need now to go forward? Perfect. All right, that brings us to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item on tonight's agenda. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not two individuals. And at the conclusion of public comment, council will have the opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. And I have a card from Rika Brown. I don't think it's on.
There we go. Rika Brown, Grants Pass. In our last meeting, a counselor asked where huge, cheap hostels have been done. This counselor asked some time ago where any city has restored the rate system that for 50 years kept water and sewer rates throughout the world low and stable. To some public servants, any new idea that has been tried somewhere else is a good idea, whether it works or not. But old, tried and true ideas from their own constituents cannot be good. Huge, cheap places to sleep are not new. They are an old business that is occasionally mentioned in song and historical fiction. They were called flop houses. They were not comfortable, private, or safe, but the customers were out of the weather for a nickel or a dime. Flop houses disappeared in the first half of the 20th century with the advent of cheap used cars that people could sleep in. In the 80s, states started mandatory car insurance, which kicked a lot of people out of their cars and into doorways, alleys, and bushes. Nobody was serving the bottom of the housing market, which grew with each recession. We can serve this part of the market in Grants Pass with 2 large hostels, one for adults and one for families and teens, each with a huge room with hundreds of cots that are 6 feet apart and foot lockers to keep their stuff safe. We can include bathrooms, showers, laundry, a reading and eating room, kennels for dogs, and a parking lot for those with cars, which they can even sleep in if they want. They could sleep secure with cameras and 3 guardians, one to watch over customers as they sleep, one to take cot rents in money or vouchers, sell sundries, and watch cameras, and one to patrol inside and out. Every idea starts with one person in one place. I got this one in Grants Pass while protesting the drug war from a homeless person who wanted to rent a big house with others in the same situation. I didn't think that would work out, but with the landlords doing credit checks. But if it was scaled up to serve the whole bottom of the market, it could pencil out. This kind of business has a market waiting for it. Homeless people wanted to give me money to start it. We can sell stock to build it by asking local businesses and residents to buy it. It need not be a nonprofit and probably should not. We need it ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak during public comment tonight? All right. Karen, did we get any emails?
So there was an email regarding housing barriers workshop follow-up, noise complaints with Republic Transfer Station, concerns with the homeless, and a problem with vagrants.
Thank you. And council, did anyone want to respond to public comment tonight? Valerie.
Yeah, I'm going to respond to 2 of them. First of all, I just want to respond to Rika. And like I said, I've never said it was a bad idea. I'm just saying you need a champion to go out and get the investors. So go for it, because we don't have a big pot of money sitting there. And sadly enough, part of the problem that we are in is because the flop houses did indeed go away, and so things cannot be rebuilt like they were. There are so many codes in our system for safety that to be able to build that is not cheap, and that is the problem. And I would even go on to say that that is is one of our problems, that there are too many codes, and that if one thing happens to somebody, then we all run out and make a new rule and a new law and a new regulation and a new code so that it will never happen again. And what we've done is we've priced ourselves out of affordable housing for that reason. So I'd love to see something go up like that, but I just don't. You need investors to invest in it, and I don't feel comfortable investing taxpayers' money at this point in time if I haven't seen one working, because that's kind of what investors want to do, is to see if they're going to get some sort of return on their money. And I think it's great because there's a lot of people that are concerned about that and would be willing to put money towards that. It's just a matter of getting them to give you that check to get it started. So I don't want to discourage you, because I do think that in a lot of ways I've thought the same thing. It makes a lot of sense, but it's just a matter of people willing to put some money behind it and back the idea. The other one I have a question about is, I have a question about the what's going on between Republic Service, the emails dealing with Republic Services and the city, and the 4 a.m. Because I've just seen that back and forth, and I guess I don't completely understand if there is a solve, if it's the city's responsibility, if we were the ones that told Republic that that's when they had to pick up their downtown services, and so that's why it is a problem, because these houses are near downtown services. I guess that's my question.
So I think to best address that issue, if you'd like us to, we can provide you with a memo that gives you details on the history of that complaint.
Because I'm not sure how to answer back or where to go with it, because I don't know the history of it.
Anybody else? Okay. Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda, which are items of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved with a single action. And I wanted to point out to you all tonight, first I have a tickle in my throat, but we have a change in item 4C. So there's a purple packet in front of you. And the change is that the city of Sherwood is also joining in with this challenge, and so it would reduce our costs. And Aaron, I don't know if you have more to say?
No, I'll take over while you're that's what it is. It's just the last minute addition to Sherwood, which reduced our costs from a little over $5,000 to a little under $5,000, and it includes Sherwood on the list, which is represented in the new packet information.
Okay, and our council president is on the phone tonight, so let's have Valerie sit in for him on reading the consent agenda. And I'll just point out that when you get to, from item F on down, our minutes. Okay.
Okay, with that, I will go through the 4A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter in an agreement with Grants Pass School District Number 7 for school marshal services. Item B, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Grants Pass School District Number 7 for school resource officer services. Item C, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement and retention agreement to join the litigation coalition challenging the state's climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. Item D, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the investment advisory services. Item E, motion approving the minutes of the City Council meeting of September 7th, 2022, and items F through X are minutes from various Urban Area Planning Commission, Tourism, Community and Public Art, Historical Buildings and Sites Committee, Housing Advisory Committee, Parks Advisory Committee, Sustainable and Energy Action Committees, Collaborative Economic Development Committee, and Central Business District Vitalization Task Force meeting minutes. And the last is the Urban Tree Advisory Committee meeting minutes. So with that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Val. Is there a second? Rob, thank you. And this is consent agenda. Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
And Joel?
Yes.
All right, consent agenda passes 5-2. Next up, matters from mayor and council. Do you have anything that you wanted to bring up tonight? Rob?
Yeah, so I have an idea where I think this needs to go, but we had an email, and I think Karen referenced it. There was a person, I think, who lived on, this is just an example, you know, because this type of thing happens all the time, but I think she lived on East Park Street and was concerned with a vagrant person or a homeless person coming to her door at 3 in the morning, and she had some ideas about, she didn't feel that certain things were being enforced properly, I guess, in the parks and so forth. And, you know, she sends that to Mayor Council, and she also sent it, I guess, to Chief Hensman. The issue that I have when someone sends us emails like that is that realistically, the council really has never been invited to or has actually been discouraged from, and we're not essentially supposed to deal with department heads directly, whether it's this issue or any other issue. You know, that would be the city manager's job. So when a citizen is complaining that the, you know, our ordinances are either being violated or not being enforced properly, et cetera, as counselors, we really have nothing that we can say to the police chief. But the city manager can actually ask for explanations, could actually suggest that something is handled differently, et cetera. So when we have emails that come in with essentially, I would say, complaints about different, whether they would be addressed by the, to the council and or Brad, or whether it's the council and or Jason, or Chief Hensman, we as counselors really can't do anything about that if something is not being handled properly. That's really the city manager's job, to investigate it and to act on it, either explain to the public why it cannot be solved or why it's very difficult to solve, or to discuss with the department head what they need to do to solve it. And it maybe come back to the council for policy issues, but as far as us as counselors saying that interacting directly with the department head and trying to address a citizen's problem, it's inappropriate. So I want to see the city manager actively demonstrate that he has read those emails and also respond to those citizens. In areas where a policy may need to shift or change, that's the council's job. But if there is a policy that's not being administered properly or as well as it could be, that's between him and his department head. And I think that Aaron needs to get involved in those emails directly, because we as counselors can't do it.
Rick?
Rob, I have no problem with chain of command, but the question I'm asking of you is, when we want transparency and to know what's going on in the city, are you also implying that we, the city councilors, should not be getting that email?
No, we absolutely should be getting the email. And our constituents sent us the email, but they may not realize, they may think, and quite frankly, I wouldn't expect them to understand really how our charter is written or how our you know, what the process is. I wouldn't expect citizens to know that. But we know, the citizens, I think, many of them would probably believe that, oh, I will send an email to Mayor Council, and, you know, Councilor Riker will go and talk to Chief Hensman about it. Citizens actually think, I'm sure that many of them think that we can actually then talk to the police chief and tell the police chief, do your job better. Or we can talk to Brad and, ask him questions. That's not our job. And it's completely inappropriate. So I would say we need to see the email chain for full transparency, but I think it has to be really clear that the people that can investigate and discuss and possibly take action is not us in those issues.
So I have a lot of people that would contact me, and I immediately direct it to Aaron, who would then send it down the pipeline. But I perceive from my constituency that they are getting communication through the city, through the council members, and then the council member knows where to disperse that information to see something's done. So I like the chain of command the way it's set up, but I also like being informed so I know what's going on in the community.
I'm not in any way, shape, or form disagreeing with the fact that we need to see it. We need to see them coming in. We need to see them going out. But the public doesn't really realize, I don't think, that that we have no authority over department heads. We have none. So I think that Aaron needs to step up and take responsibility for that interaction.
So we've had different email response policies in the past. Previous council, I responded to every single email personally. And then we backed that off through direction from council on anything that's borderline policy, leave it alone. Council will be the ones responding, and if it's strictly operational, I'll respond. And as you know, I have responded to ones that are seen as operational because I respond all and you also receive my response. So if there's one email that either got missed or was borderline, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. So Councilor Pell, I'll be responding to that one. Thank you.
Val?
Oh, I just want to clarify, because I know something that I've done is I've often written to them saying, hey, I will put this where I think it needs to go, would be appropriate, and then I will forward it to that particular person. So I've never really had a problem with that. I didn't necessarily call them, but I just kind of said, hey, I think this is in your wheelboat. And sometimes they'll tell me I can't do anything or whatever, and I'll get back to them, or sometimes they will respond. So I haven't really had a problem, just kind of responding, saying, hey, thanks for getting in contact. I can't necessarily do something, but I can send it to somebody and have them take a look at it. Another thing I would like to know, this is something that I've often wondered, is that, when we get a lot of these people that are very frustrated at, the nighttime activities that go on and the sound and those sorts of things, and I do know that our police officers are out there and they're working as hard as they can, but they can only do so much, is if we can keep track of those emails and send them to the judge down in California, just to say, we'd really like to hear what's going on with our lawsuit, because I feel like, we're being held hostage to a certain extent. They heard it in December, and we still, 10 months later, have not received a response, and our citizens are the ones who are paying the price, and I get frustrated at that.
Yeah, I can appreciate that frustration, and we're hoping still that within the next 2 or 3 months we will get a response from the Ninth Circuit Court. They were thinking it might be a year out, and so we're coming up on that as they heard it, I think, December 9th or something like that of this last year.
Mm-hmm. Do they take letters?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think as far as the email reply policy, Aaron was replying to everything when I became mayor, and plenty of them, he had to give a pretty vague answer that it was council policy determination or something, but I did find it not the best use of our manager's time to be replying to every single email that came in, so I have to take some responsibility for that. But I would say if there is one, that he doesn't catch, because right now if it's a policy issue, he's supposed to be leaving it to us to reply to, assuming they're writing to mayor council. And you can choose to reply or not, obviously. But if it's a city procedure or kind of a staffing issue, then he will answer those, and he replies all so you can see it. So if he hasn't replied all, then you know that he hasn't replied. And if there's one that catches your eye that is something you'd like him to reply to, you could just forward it and just say, hey, not sure if you saw this one, but this one could use a response. And it's tricky, you know, I mean, those emails are really coming to us, and it just so happens that the manager also sees them, but kind of a gray zone there. Anyway, are there other things that people wanted to bring up tonight? Val?
One last push for the Ride Along the Rogue. They are still accepting people to ride on the bicycle routes. They start in Palmerton Park on Saturday morning, and it should be a good day. They have the longest one starting at 9, and then I think they have one at 9:45 for the 35 mile, and then the 20 mile starts at 10:30. So you can go and sign up or show up early that morning if you're still interested, or go to ridealongtherogue.org.
Anything else? Items from staff?
Just want to thank Karen for putting the LLC packets together. You have in front of you your LLC agenda packet, so it's all the information you need there for the upcoming event. And then I'm going to leave the shout out for James and the Art Along the Road to Brad. You can mention that coming up, because I think we won't have a business meeting until after that.
Thank you. October 7, 8, and 9, Art Along the Road downtown. Posters have been starting to be distributed around town. We have a series of, I think, 8 to 10 bands that are lined up. We have over 30 vendors that are going to be there. There's going to be a number of featured chalk artists, as well as some of the smaller ones. We're going to have about the same number of kids blocks that we did last year, and I think maybe 50 more or so. So there's a couple hundred for kids to get out there. We are shifting around the layout a little bit so that the bandstand this year is actually going to be in the Owl Lot. So kind of opening up for a few more artists actually on the street on both H and 5th. So yeah, we're excited about it. The website has more information, and if anybody wants to volunteer, you can let me or James know. Most of the sponsorships are kind of wrapped up. We had over $14,000 in sponsorships this year from 14 different local businesses, so that was great. So it's coming together. Just fingers crossed for the rain. No rain, October 7, 8, and 9.
All right. No executive sessions. Guess we'll just
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right. Second from Vanessa. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning this evening, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You got in right before the opposition there, Joel. All right. Good night, everyone. See you next Monday.